We didn't realize we were moving into a battlefield. It was just supposed to be a quiet place for Mom to retire. After Dad passed away, I convinced her to sell the old house and start fresh in a neighborhood called Pinecrest Gardens. It looked peaceful, neatly trimmed lawns, tree-lined streets, pastel-colored houses with seasonal wreaths. Like something out of a postcard. We moved in on a Thursday. By Friday evening, we'd already made our first enemy. Mom and I were eating delivery pizza on the living room floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the smell of fresh paint, when the knock came, sharp, rhythmic. Not neighborly. At the door stood a woman in her late 50s, wearing a tailored white pantsuit that looked like it had never touched dust in its life. Her hair was pulled into a steel-colored bun, and she held a black notebook in one hand like a judge about to deliver a sentence. "Welcome to Pinecrest Gardens," she said without a trace of warmth. "I'm Eleanor Hoffman, HOA president." "Hi." "There," Mom replied, still chewing. "Would you like to come in?" "We've got pepperoni, and I prefer to keep things professional," Eleanor cut her off. "Your mailbox is non-regulation. It's 2 shades darker than permitted. You'll need to repaint it by Friday." Mom blinked. "Hi. We just moved in. There are no exceptions for new residents. Everything you need to know is in the welcome packet," she said, tapping her notebook. "It's extensive. Please familiarize yourself before more violations occur." And just like that, she turned on her pristine white heel and marched away. We hadn't even unpacked our mugs yet, and we were already on someone's list. We thought that would be the end of it. A rude neighbor with too much time on her hands. We're wrong. That mailbox warning was just Eleanor's opening salvo. Over the next 3 months, she buried us in violation letters like some kind of bureaucratic sniper. January 2nd. Fine for holiday decorations left up too long. January 5th. Warning for trash bins visible from street during non-designated hours. January 9th. Formal notice about bird feeder attracting non-native species. And my personal favorite, January 12th. Rose bush encroaching 1.25 inches onto shared green space. That one came with photos. From 3 different angles. Mom tried to smooth things over. That's just who she is. She baked cookies, invited Eleanor for tea, even offered to help organize community events. Eleanor declined everything with an icy smile and said, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but your yard continues to violate our aesthetic guidelines." Aesthetic guidelines, this from a woman who had plastic flamingos in her backyard last Easter. What really lit the fuse, though, was Raymond. Raymond is a garden gnome, a sweet little ceramic guy in a fishing hat, holding a pole with a carved fish dangling at the end. Dad gave him to Mom on their last anniversary before his heart attack. He said Raymond looked like the 2 of them after retirement. Peaceful, a little goofy, always by the water. Mom placed him beside the front steps, nestled between her roses. 2 weeks later, Eleanor came storming up the walkway, notebook in hand. "This cheapens the aesthetic of Pinecrest Gardens," she snapped, pointing at Raymond like he'd insulted her mother. Mom held her ground. "The rules say tasteful lawn. Ornaments are allowed." "That's not tasteful," Eleanor sneered. "It's tacky. Remove it by Sunday or face escalating consequences." Mom showed her the handbook calmly. "Raymond stays." Her hands were trembling. I could tell the stress was already affecting her asthma, but she wouldn't back down. That was the first time I saw real fear in my mother's eyes. The annual summer barbecue at the Pinecrest clubhouse was supposed to bring the community together. Instead, it became a stage for public humiliation. We arrived just as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows over the fake cobblestone parking lot. The smell of grilled burgers mixed with the sound of polite laughter and distant music. But something was wrong. People looked at us, then quickly looked away. I spotted Eleanor at the front of the crowd, standing at a podium with a projector behind her. She wore a pearl necklace and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Glad you could join us," she said into the mic as we took our seats. "I was just discussing how certain residents are compromising our property values." She clicked to the next slide. It was a photo of our house. Raymond circled in angry red ink. "This," she announced, "is the kind of aesthetic negligence that drives away quality buyers." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few people actually nodded. Mom stood up slowly. Her face was pale. "Eleanor, this isn't appropriate. This is a community event, not a disciplinary hearing." Eleanor waved her off. "The bylaws clearly state I'm responsible for maintaining standards." "You're exceeding your authority," Mom sighed, her voice trembling, "and you're targeting us. Your attitude has been noted." "Repeatedly," Eleanor snapped. "If you're unhappy, feel free to address it at the next board meeting." Mom clutched her chest. I saw it immediately, the wheezing in her breath, the panic behind her eyes. She reached into her purse for her inhaler. That's when Eleanor marched over and ripped it from her hand. "This behavior is exactly the problem," she said loudly, holding it up like a piece of evidence. "Give that back," I shouted, bolting from my seat. 2 board members stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "She needs that to breathe," I screamed. "She needs to respect authority," Eleanor replied coldly, dropping the inhaler into her handbag. Meeting adjourned. Mom collapsed seconds later. I caught her just before she hit the ground, yelling for someone, anyone, to call 911. Her lips were turning blue. I waited in the hospital for hours, pacing like a man possessed. Finally, Dr. Patel sat me down. "Your mother suffered a severe asthma attack. If you hadn't gotten her here when you did ... He trailed off, shaking his head. "Can I see her?" I asked. He nodded. "She's stable. But she's asking for something ... odd. A secure phone?" "When?" I entered her hospital room. Mom looked weak, but calm. Her breathing was assisted by a machine, her oxygen levels slowly rising. She looked at me and said, "Did you bring my secure phone?" "What?" I blinked. "Mom, we need to report Eleanor." "You almost died." "No police." "Not yet," she said firmly. "Just get the phone. It's in the locked drawer of my nightstand. Use the key inside Pride and Prejudice." I did exactly what she said. Inside the drawer, I found a phone I didn't recognize, heavy, unbranded, military grade, and a black notebook filled with strange entries and account numbers. When I returned to her room, she was sitting upright. "Lock the door," she said. I did. Then she took the phone, entered a long code, and made a call. Aunt Catherine Reynolds reporting. Authorization code, Lenine Delta 47. Situation escalating. Subject has interfered with federal property. I stood frozen. Wait. Agent. She hung up. "I'm not just a retired kindergarten teacher," she said quietly. "I've worked for the FBI for 35 years. Financial Crimes Division." My mind went blank. The next few minutes unraveled my entire childhood. "Your father was my handler," Mom said gently. "We weren't supposed to fall in love, but we did. He supported my work until the day he died." "You mean all those years you were in PTA meetings and baking pies? You were investigating criminals? Undercover, yes?" "That was my cover." She pulled a chain from beneath her gown. A real, solid FBI badge gleamed at the end. "You always wondered why I got so upset when Raymond was threatened," she added with a half smile. "That gnome had a tracker inside. It's been recording Eleanor's conversations for months." My jaw dropped. "Wait, the inhaler bugged with audio and location surveillance. Federal property. When Eleanor stole it, she committed a felony, and gave us grounds to escalate. Right then, a knock came at the door. 2 agents entered. "Agent Reynolds," one said, "Director Swanson has authorized immediate action." "We're moving in." Mom turned to me. "You're going?" "To help finish this." The rain had turned Pinecrest Gardens into a watercolor painting, soft streaked and washed in shadows. I pulled into our driveway, the wheels crunching on gravel. Everything looked normal, until you knew what to look for. I spotted the black SUV parked 3 houses down, a second one near the corner behind a pickup truck, and a third tucked beneath a tree with tinted windows. They were here. The letter taped to our front door flapped in the wind. My hands curled into fists as I peeled it off. Another HOA notice, this time a $500 fine for disruptive conduct at a community event. The event where Eleanor stole a medical device from my mother and nearly killed her. It was signed in blue ink by Eleanor Hoffman herself and stamped with the HOA's official seal. Bold, heartless, infuriating. I threw it on the counter. Upstairs, I found the locked drawer just like Mom described. Inside, her secure phone buzzed to life, and the notebook, the one filled with strange notations, now made perfect sense. These weren't HOA violations. They were transaction trails, fake landscaping invoices, inflated construction budgets, all coded in a way only someone with serious training would understand. When I returned to the hospital, Mom was dressed and waiting. "You're not supposed to be discharged yet," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Dr. Patel is actually Agent Patel. I'm fine. We need to move." Agent Clark and Rodriguez were already in the room, scanning the notebook and confirming the details. "This," Rodriguez said, holding it up, "confirms the funds moved quarterly, always a few days after community-wide fee collections. That means tomorrow's emergency HOA meeting is our window." I was still trying to absorb the fact that half of our neighbors were federal agents. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. Mom touched my arm. "Go home, attend the meeting. Record. Everything. They'll expect me to be absent, but I'll be there." I blinked. "What about Eleanor?" Mom's eyes narrowed. "She won't see it coming." That night, I couldn't sleep. At 12:04 a.m., a text came through from an unknown number. "Operation active at 0900. Be ready." I stared out my bedroom window. Across the street, the porch lights were out at Eleanor's place, but I noticed shadows moving behind the curtains. She was prepping something, likely the final nail she thought she was driving into our coffin. Past Raymond the gnome on the way back inside. The rain had washed him clean. He sat there, grinning, fishing pole in hand, unknowingly in the middle of a federal sting operation. By 7:30 a.m., I was dressed, wired with a discreet audio recorder clipped to the button of my shirt, standard issue, courtesy of Agent Rodriguez. I wore my best suburban victim face. Neighbors began gathering at the Pinecrest Gardens Community Center. It was the same building where Mom collapsed just 48 hours ago. Inside, Eleanor was already seated at the center table. She wore a tailored navy blazer, a smug expression, and too much perfume. Flanking her were Stuart and Diana, loyal board members who clung to her like remeras on a shark. The inhaler was sitting on the table. In front of her. She placed it there like a trophy. "Let's begin," Eleanor said, clapping her hands and speaking into the mic. "We've called this emergency meeting to address the Reynolds family's repeated violations and hostile behavior." She gestured to a projector screen. Photo after photo appeared: our mailbox, the bird feeder, the rose bush, Halloween. "Decorations from last year. These are the images of disrespect," she said. "This is what devalues homes in our community." A few neighbors murmured. Some looked uncomfortable. Others nodded. "Double quotes, Miss Reynolds," Eleanor said, referring to my mother. Even had the audacity to fake a medical emergency during my speech. At the barbecue, it was a blatant attempt to manipulate public opinion and distract from her noncompliance. Gasps from the crowd. I stood. You stole her inhaler, I said. She had a real asthma attack. Eleanor waved me off. She went to the hospital, didn't she? Obviously, she recovered. You can't expect to disrupt community events without consequence. She held up the inhaler with a dramatic flourish. This was removed to prevent further outbursts. Suddenly, the rear doors opened. Every head turned. There stood Mom. She entered slowly, hunched, playing the frail retiree. Oxygen tank dragging behind her, her steps deliberately weak. You should not be here, Eleanor barked. This is a private board meeting. Mom reached into her handbag, pulled out a small leather wallet, and flipped it open. FBI badge. Gold and real. Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped their coffee. I'm Special Agent Catherine Reynolds, she said, standing tall. Her voice lost all shakiness. And this board is under investigation for financial fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Eleanor's mouth opened, closed, opened again. What? What is this? This is a stunt. No. Came a new voice. Agent Clark stood from the back row, flashing her own badge. We have been operating undercover in this neighborhood for 8 months. One by one, others stood. People we thought were residents. They held up badges. Every table had at least one. You've been laundering HOA dues through shell companies posing as vendors, Mom continued. We have recordings, bank records, and eyewitness accounts. And, she added, turning toward the inhaler, you stole federal surveillance equipment, then denied medical assistance to a federal agent. Eleanor finally stood, her face twitching. I didn't know. This is a setup. You'll have plenty of time to explain that to a judge, Agent Rodriguez said, approaching the table. Eleanor Hoffman, you're under arrest. He recited her rights as she stood frozen. The inhaler was placed in an evidence bag. Neighbors began whispering, then shouting, You made us pay for a new pool. My grandmother sold her car because of your fines. You threatened to foreclose on my house over paint chips. Eleanor was handcuffed and escorted out, her perfume still lingering in the silence she left behind. The next few hours moved in a blur. The state HOA regulatory commission arrived. They suspended the board indefinitely. A temporary committee made up of actual residents was appointed. Investigations opened into Eleanor's personal accounts and real estate holdings. Turns out she'd laundered over $1.2 million through fake contractors, ghost landscaping services, and fake renovation assessments. Diana cut a deal in exchange for full cooperation. Stewart lawyered up and stopped talking. The fines? All voided. Public apologies issued. The gnome? Left in peace. When Mom and I returned home that evening, she stood quietly in the doorway for a moment. Then she looked at Raymond and said, Mission complete. You're really done? I asked. Mom smiled and patted her badge. After 35 years, this was my last one. Seriously? She nodded. I'll file my final report tomorrow. After that, I'll be exactly who you always thought I was. I laughed. Kindergarten teacher? She shrugged. With a mean right. Hook and a gnome army. The following morning, Pinecrest Gardens didn't wake up to the smell of sprinklers or morning joggers. It woke up to chaos. By 9 a.m., news vans had lined the streets. Cameras panned across our quiet little neighborhood as headlines rolled out like a thriller movie. HOA president arrested in federal sting. FBI undercover agent exposes $1.2 million fraud. Asthmatic retiree turns out to be FBI veteran. Reporters swarmed the gates. Neighbors who once ignored us were suddenly offering hugs, casseroles, and a very awkward welcome banner that read, "Thank you, Agent Reynolds." Even Raymond the Gnome was cleaned off and placed on a decorative rock pedestal like a war hero. But beneath all that, the truth was spreading. The HOA hadn't just abused power, they'd targeted vulnerable homeowners, especially the elderly. Eleanor and her cronies had been exploiting fines, threatening liens, and siphoning funds meant for community improvements. Mom met quietly with elderly neighbors who had stories to tell. A widow fined $2,000 for structural violations on her mailbox. A disabled vet forced to remove a wheelchair ramp deemed unsightly. A couple charged for lawn care services they never received. Mom documented every word. Even after retirement, she couldn't just walk away. "You're still working, aren't you?" I asked. She smiled. "Old habits die hard." With Eleanor and most of her board facing prosecution, the community had to rebuild. A temporary HOA oversight panel was formed, made up of ordinary residents, no lifetime titles, no surprise fees, no designer CLIPBOARDS. The first official meeting, they invited Mom to speak. She declined. Instead, she sent me with a letter. I walked to the podium, looked around at faces that had once scowled at us for trash cans and gnomes, and read, "Pinecrest Gardens is not a dictatorship. It is a neighborhood. Let this be the beginning of something new, something kind, fair, and honest. If you want rules, write them together. If you want respect, give it. And if you want peace, stop making war over gnomes." The room erupted in applause. The new board unanimously passed a vote banning fine quotas, ensuring homeowners could no longer be targeted for minor or fabricated infractions. And yes, Raymond the Gnome was officially grandfathered into the community charter. He even got a nameplate. One evening, about 2 weeks after the takedown, I found Mom in the backyard. She sat under the porch light, tea in one hand, her old FBI badge in the other. Not crying, not smiling, just thinking. "What you're doing?" I asked. "Letting go," she replied. I sat beside her. "I spent so long pretending to be someone else," she said. "Teacher, widow, homeowner, asthmatic. It's strange being myself again." "You were always yourself," I told her. "You just had layers." She laughed softly. "So did Dad. You know, he kept a flash drive with every case file we worked on. Said it'd make a great book someday." I smiled. "You should write it." She looked at me for a long moment. "Maybe we write it together." That night, we opened Dad's old laptop and scrolled through decades of missions, photos, even old messages from field offices across the country. It was like meeting both of them, the real them, all over again. And for the first time in a long time, our house felt full again. The trial came quickly, thanks to the evidence from Mom's surveillance. Eleanor Hoffman faced a litany of charges: wire fraud, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, assault of a federal agent, misuse of public funds, illegal seizure of government property. She took a plea deal, 20 years with no parole. The courtroom was silent. As the judge read the sentence, Eleanor never once looked at us. Her properties were seized, her bank accounts drained, her HOA dismantled. And in a final poetic touch, the neighborhood voted to rename the community center after my father, the Daniel Reynolds Commons. Eleanor's diamond-studded watch, the one she used to mock my mother for being late, was now evidence in an FBI museum display titled "Crimes of HOA Tyranny." We visited it the following month. Raymond the Gnome, or at least his replica, sat in the glass case beneath her watch. My mom called it the greatest long game I ever played. Life slowly returned to normal, whatever that means when your mom's an ex-spy and your garden gnome helped expose organized crime. Mom officially signed her retirement. Paperwork. She began volunteering at the local library and hosting book clubs on the porch. Neighbors who once feared her now came for brownies and advice. Kids waved at her like she was a superhero. Honestly, she kind of is. And May left my job in tech. I started writing. First just to get it all out, then to tell. Stories like this. The kind that make people gasp and laugh and cry. The kind that help us remember. The world is full of quiet warriors hiding in plain sight. One morning, Mom handed me her notebook, the one full of transactions and case notes. You might want this, she said, if you're really going to tell our story. I looked at the worn leather cover. Inside were hundreds of entries, but the first page just said, Case number 329, Pinecrest Gardens. Status, closed. Mission, outcome, successful. Subject apprehended. Recommendation, give Raymond a rise. You never really know who someone is, not until a gnome becomes evidence, not until a mother becomes a federal agent, not until justice comes disguised as asthma and ends in freedom.